Hello and welcome to Mytech U, the July edition, where today we are going to be talking about the human firewall and how it's the information security's greatest asset. My name is Nathan Austin. We are joined by our presenter today, Gerald Howland, who is a security expert, an IT expert, overall guru of technology. And we're going to talk about how all the stuff that we work on, that we do, and the pieces and tools and things that we put in place from a security perspective, without handling this one issue, it's almost all for naught. So, but it's definitely part of the overall plan to protect your organization. So, Gerald, without further ado, please introduce yourself and take it away. And just real quick, forgive me, from a housekeeping note, the control panel does have some question section. All the audience is muted. The session is being recorded. But if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just put a question in the question panel, and we will either answer it during the presentation or we will follow up with you on offline if we're not able to get the question answered during the presentation. So, housekeeping out of the way, Gerald, please take it away.
Thanks, Nathan. My name is Gerald. I'm one of the technical leaders here at Mytech, and I've been doing IT for a little over 20 years now, and this is becoming a big deal. It's one of the reasons why we're beginning to focus on this ourselves. And I think that we can give you some good training here as to what we've found and why this is such a big deal for us. So everybody's seen something like this before. It's a typical spam message. This is a very common message about a scam, where they try to take your money either through a Nigerian prince or, hey, give us some money and we'll give you more money back. Those kinds of things. We've all seen this before. It's a very common thing to see. It's very, it's so ubiquitous now that we all ignore it as we normally would. But we're starting to see messages like these that are starting to come up now. Messages that are far more directed, far more detailed, far more trying to fool you into taking action that you normally wouldn't see. And if you take these kind of messages and you tie it to accounts that are tied to things like LinkedIn, Google, Pinterest, Amazon, whatever it might be, we all have accounts to these messages. So now we all start becoming a major issue. So by using these accounts and faking, the messages that are coming out to people, what we start seeing is what we call the new phish. The new phish is all of the types of messages that start to fool you into things that you want to click on. So whether it might be a fake delivery message, whether it be a gift certificate to Amazon or a free pizza from Pizza Hut, you'd be surprised how much stuff is out there. So now the security ends up becoming a major problem. And the reason why it's a problem is because we're people. We're the ones that are now capable of clicking on this, and we're the ones that are capable of doing all these kinds of things. No matter how much we try, we can't block people from clicking on things that they shouldn't be clicking on. So to give you an example of how this works, I've got a little bit of a story here. This is a close friend of mine that this kind of phishing type attack actually has happened to. I've anonymized some of the names so that we don't have to worry about this, but we do have a company. This fake company is a tech company, and the CEO we're going to call Bullwinkle. He has a very good friend who is the CFO of his organization, which is Rocky. And of course we've got a bad guy, Boris in this case, and Boris has been following this company because, being a tech company, there's always something that I can try to do. And he kind of started following the CEO and the CFO on LinkedIn and started seeing what was going on. Well, Boris thought, it'd be a great idea to actually get into the head of the CEO and actually start seeing what they're trying to do for a business. Maybe I can get something that I can exploit from them. So Boris launches a phishing attack against the CEO. Now the CEO, being a really smart guy, all of a sudden gets this message saying, hey, your 365, password is invalid. We need you to reset it. So the CEO resets it, not knowing that it's not actually from Microsoft and it's actually from the bad guy. Now the bad guy actually has the credentials for the CEO. He can log into the CEO's email. He can see all sorts of things. Well, you know, we'll take it a couple months later. The CEO posts on LinkedIn that we have gotten round one financing for about $25 million. And so the bad dude, this Boris guy, really starts taking a liking to what's going on and says, you know, I want part of that $25 million. So he starts looking at things and starts going through the email of the CEO and seeing that they're doing business deals and that they're trying to do all these things. And so he says, you know what? I'm going to send a message to the CFO. And I'm going to send him a text message because I know this the CFO's cell phone number. I'm going to send him a text message that's been spoofed from the CEO that says, hey, check your email. And then I'm going to spoof a message from the CEO's mailbox. And in fact, I don't even have to technically spoof it because I actually have access to the CEO's mailbox. But I'm going to send a message to the CFO that says, I need you to wire $1.7 million into this holding account for a business deal that's coming up. Of course, the CFO knows that there's all sorts of business deals coming up, takes action, does the wire transfer just as expected, and now Boris has got $1.7 million richer. So this actually happened to a business. It took an amazing amount of time for them to actually realize what had happened. And it ended up being about 4 days later, which is after the wire transfer recall rate. And they ended up losing about $1.7 million before they actually figured out what had happened. Pretty big deal in today's world. In fact, FBI estimates that last year alone in wire transfer CEO fraud was almost a $2.3 billion business for the bad guys. And this year we're even on track to almost double that so far. So pretty big deal.
It's a huge deal, and so like 1.7 million seems like a lot of money, especially to many small businesses. But some people are maybe thinking, well, gosh, I don't have 1.7 million dollars in my bank account. They're not going to come after me. Well, let me give you another example of something that happened to one of our customers that was nearly identical to this scam, and it's fortunate that they were able to recover the funds actually. But let me tell you a little bit of that story. So I get a call. This is the real story. Last December, and it was from the CEO of the organization. They said, and they said, we need to stop. We need to somehow block these emails from happening. And the answer is, well, we can't really block these emails from happening because people that are doing this, they evade these email systems that are designed to block it. So a lot of them get blocked, but we can't 100% block all of them unless we just turn off emails. So that's not reasonable. What had happened, he called me and he said, all right, so here's what happened. So someone spoofed my email and sent it to their controller. And the CEO was out of town, and the controller was corresponding, and said basically, and it was actually a vendor had said, hey, set some money and send it to this vendor because it's this deal we're doing. Actually, fortunately, it was domestic. It was actually in Chicago. And he said, all right, can you PayPal me this account? And so the controller's like, well, we don't have PayPal. Let me try and set it up. Tried to set it up, couldn't get it authorized because there's urgency, right? Because that's the whole point that you typically try and do it urgently. It's like, hey, no, but send it. We need it tomorrow. You need to get this thing FedEx. I need this tomorrow. So he's like, I can't get a PayPal account set up. I'm not getting it authorized. He was having a problem with that. So he's like, can I FedEx you a check? So they said, sure, you can FedEx us a check. So they ended up, long story short, they ended up actually overnighting a check to him. I can't remember the amount, but it was probably in the ballpark of around $50,000. And because it was domestic, they were able to cancel it. But the way they found out about it is because the controller went over to the CEO when the CEO got back in town, said, hey, I just got that PayPal account set up that we were talking about. And he's like, what PayPal account? And then he started digging. He's like, oh, for that vendor that we worked with, I ended up FedExing him a check. Had no idea. It was a few days later, and fortunately they were able to stop the check, and so they didn't lose any funds. But that's a real scenario that actually happened where they're trying to, where they can trick you. Now, it wasn't $1.7 million like the example that Gerald gave, but that happened to one of our customers, and they're trying to find any way to get money from you to create urgency and to get someone who thinks they're talking to someone who's authorized to spend the money to spend the money. So just a little real example from one of our customers out here.
Yeah, that FBI, that $2.3 billion, I wanted to say that the average number was like less than 100K. So, I mean, we're talking about a lot of money, a lot of instances, and not even in large sums at a time. So that's, yeah, right along that same line. It's even in small doses, it's still a dangerous thing. So, well, we all have technical solutions to solve this though, right? I like to think that, we can do anything that we can put computers in place to do just about anything, right? Why can't we solve this problem by using message filters and web filters? We've all got antivirus on our computers and firewalls and all these things that we need to really make our computers secure, right? But the problem is there's always, as this picture puts it, Dave in the corner. There's always that one person that can click on that link, that gets that message, that can bypass all of this stuff and can break your environment in total.
Audio.
Sorry, Stephanie, was that something, or was that just nothing?
Yep, it's back working.
Okay, audio's back working, perfect. Sorry if we had any audio problems there.
Yeah, so in this picture, Dave was our big issue, and all it takes is that one person to cause that risk in losing the capabilities of all of this technology that we put in place. So the real answer is a human firewall. Let's start training our users to actually know what to click on, what not to click on, what is a risk, what's not a risk, and even more than just spam in this case. Actually even going beyond that and saying, don't pick up USB drives in the parking lot, know what kind of wireless you're checking into, identify all of those kinds of things before you get too far down that path. So how do we do this? How do we actually build a human firewall? Well, the idea is that we need to convert our humans, our staff, our workers that are our employees for our companies into understanding what is a risk, what's not. So the first step is we need to baseline it. We actually need to know what kind of risk we're dealing with. If we're dealing with a high risk scenario, we need to train more. We need to get far more interactive about it. If we've got a very low risk, then we can, we know where we're at. So we need to show why we actually need to do this kind of stuff. We need to do a training process that's very engaging and interesting, something that they will learn something about. We need to reinforce all of this action. So by regularly testing the users, checking up on them, making sure that they aren't susceptible to those things that we're training them on. We need to keep it current. So updating it, giving them information that's updated on a regular basis and showing the current threats, and then keep the cycle going. So over it and over and over again.
So Gerald, I want to hit on a couple things here. One, I love the fact we talk about a baseline, because I think it's human nature. Well, there's two parts to it. One, there's the fear around it, like, gosh, I'm not sure what this is about, right? But it's definitely human nature to feel like, oh, this won't affect me, this won't happen to me. There's psychological biases around feeling that bad things only happen to other people, or I'm too small, or that our security is good enough, or whatever. And so, like, showing a baseline is an excellent start. And we're going to talk a little bit later about, and I want everyone to start thinking about this to kind of plant a seed who's listening here, because we have a poll that we're going to ask you as far as thinking about how many people do you think click on this stuff on average. But we'd want to do a baseline on your organization to show you what that looks like for you. And then the second thing that I'd say, we've had customers that have asked us about, well, how can you give us examples and maybe give us like a little cheat sheet that we can keep on our computers or near our desks that can help us avoid some of these issues. The answer is yes and no. The problem with that is that to the fourth bullet here of keeping it current is this stuff changes constantly. Like Gerald opened this presentation with what used to be a very obvious phishing scam, and now today those scams look so authentic. It's really difficult to tell what is authentic and not authentic. So it has to keep current, and so a one-time piece of paper PDF that might sit on your desk or stapled to your wall is not good enough. It's got to keep current so that your team are currently always aware of the new threats or the new methods that people are going to try and fool you. So anyway, I love a couple of those points, Gerald. So wanted to reinforce some of that.
Yep. So let's talk about this baseline. This baseline is kind of a unique piece, and it is very important though, because it is identifying how much risk you actually have. And these baselines, we actually need to set it up so that we actually get a good baseline. So in the case of what we're planning for most cases, is we're talking about these phishing emails. So we need to make sure that we set up our servers to allow those kind of things to happen. We need to make sure that we perform online searches to find out how vulnerable we actually are. So a lot of people don't realize, but you know, your email addresses are listed in various public forums all over the place, and that is where these bad guys get their lists of addresses to actually spoof against. You'd be surprised how easy it is to actually find that kind of stuff out on the internet. There are just strictly out on the black market of the internet, there are literally lists of millions and millions of just email addresses and valid email addresses for businesses to actually try. We also want to do all this stuff blind to the end users. We don't want the end users to know that we're actually performing these kind of tests, because if they do, then they're going to say, oh, well, this one's obviously a fake. I'm not going to click on this. We want to actually see what kind of test this actually performs and make sure that it's valid. So only the people that are necessary to know about these kinds of things need to know. And once we do all of these kinds of things and we get this test back and we find out how many clicks actually happen, then we actually want to share it to the staff and actually tell the staff, hey, this is what's happened, and this is the test that we performed, and this is how many of you guys clicked on it. This is how dangerous that can be. It only takes that one user to really make that difference, and so let's try to make sure that everybody does it. So I think this is our question here now. I know Nate kind of started alluding to this. How many people do you think actually clicks on these tests? So as a percentage, how many people do you think is normal for a beta test?
So we just opened the poll, and so I'll give you all some time to be able to answer that really quick. So as people, please just go ahead and click on one of those radio buttons as far as what percentage you think of people actually will click on these things. And I'll tell you, we ran this test on Mytech, and I'm not going to give you the percentage, but we have sales staff, we have accounting staff, we have, and then of course a lot of engineering staff. That's the majority of our team is engineers. And I was surprised to find out that, and Gerald, back me up if I think I'm correct on this, that more of our engineers clicked on the link than our sales and accounting or non-technical staff. Is that correct?
That would be pretty close to correct. It was about, from a technical standpoint or from a pure position standpoint, it was about 50-50. But yeah, when you start putting the averages to use, yeah, it was a little bit more on the technical side than anything. So even smart people that understand that this kind of stuff is out there are more than capable of falling for it and clicking on it. So
yeah, that's the message, is that folks that you even think wouldn't necessarily fall for it because you think that they'd be aware, or the savvier folks, they still click on it too. So I know most everyone's voted. I'll keep it open for another maybe 15 seconds. If those are here, just go ahead and click on that really quick. Love to see a couple more votes, because I know there's a couple folks that haven't yet done it yet. But yeah. So, and Gerald, so as people are finishing up, I'm going to give it 10 more seconds. So tell me a little bit about, so how does this happen? There's got to be some, if we're sending spoofed emails to try and get people to click on stuff, I know you said it's got to be anonymous. but help me walk me through that a little bit before we announce the actual number. And I just closed the poll, but go ahead and tell me a little bit about that, Gerald, please.
Yeah, so normally what we do is we send out a a lot of times these tests are a random selection of messages that spoof everything from Pizza Hut giving you a free pizza to Amazon giving you a free gift card to your bank saying that your account is got a major security issue on it, or your password needs to be reset on your email, a whole bunch of different things. And we actually just kind of randomly pick them per user, and we say, hey, what kind of stuff is out there? See if they actually fall for what these traps are. And much of the time, these are not necessarily targeted, but they do spoof some. They'll spoof like your domain name and a couple pieces of information. But they're if you know what you're looking for, they're not a absolute foolproof system, right? If you look at the links, if you look at the URLs, if you look at all that kind of stuff, even the reply addresses, you can identify where those kind of risks are. So
that's good. Part of the point I wanted to make too is that it requires collaboration, and you were saying that too. We got to collaborate with key stakeholders and to make sure that they're in the know, because we basically have to make sure that these emails that are needing to look bad, needing to look like spam, get through. So we have to collaborate with you to deliver that. But it definitely is something that takes some effort, but the results kind of are the proof as far as the need for helping educate your team. So, but Gerald, with that said, so I'll let you announce the actual percentages here in a second, but basically it was about a 50-50 split on the poll between folks between 31 and 40%, or 41 and 50%. It was about a 50-50 split. So that's actually a little higher than what the average is. But Gerald, do you want to tell us what's the average kind of click rate typically on when we do things like this?
Yeah, so most companies usually have a click rate of about 18 to 20%. So that's still pretty high. And usually after good training, that usually drops to next to zero. Which is really good. Ultimately you want that to be zero, and as close as to zero as possible. So yeah, it's amazing how many people click through. Many times it is really high. I have heard of groups that do it as high as they get 50% click through if they're trying to exploit them and trying to really fool their users. And even higher if I'm trying to actually target somebody to get somebody to actually click on it. If I was truly trying to be a bad guy, it is all about making it look as real as possible and as true as possible to everything. So that's always kind of the catch-22. So we want to give people kind of some obvious things that they actually understand and learn from, instead of always being the dire consequence of bad emails.
Gerald, as you talk through that, and as you talk about the 18 to 20% being the average, your slide that had the graphic of, on this corner you've got computer security, and in this corner you've got Dave, because really all it takes is one, just one, right? So so we challenge everyone to think about, and we're going to talk about this next week in Minnesota, and next in the third week of August in Colorado, about all this stuff. Most likely, if you have a 18 to 20% click-through rate on some of this stuff, and just you think any one person in your entire organization might click on something like this that could create ransomware or cause a problem, that's all it takes. So this is the problem that we're dealing with, and so this is only part of the solution, because chances are there's going to be someone in your organization that does click on it, even though we try and put all these pieces in place to protect you. Then what do you do then, right? So that's not the topic of this conversation. That's the topic for next week. We have an event here in Minnesota, and next month in Colorado. We'll send a follow-up email to the attendees about that, so you can find out what the next step is if someone does click on it in your organization. But the point here is just really that one is all it takes, and so we just need to do our due diligence to try and prevent that from happening.
Yep, that's a perfect example of what that risk is. It is only that one person. So how do we move forward with this? Well, now that we know how many people have clicked on this, we actually need to train people. And this training, the problem with training is everybody's had poor training. So we need to make sure that the training is something that we can measure and track, that we get some good response from, and ends up being interactive. So things that we really focus on is we do interactive online training. That is kind of the great way of being able to measure and track and make sure that everybody completes things. They can also do it on their own time, so it's not like trying to schedule big, what we call lunchroom presentations. And additionally, everybody kind of gets more engaged because they actually have to interact with things to be able to do stuff. We also want to make sure that the training actually shows some real world examples, right? I want to be able to say, what happens when I do click on this message? What happens when this message actually does get through? What kinds of things, what do these bad guys do with this? If I accidentally connect to some roaming Wi-Fi hotspot out in the, at the local coffee shop, what is that risk? Am I actually connecting to the right one? How do I identify what I'm actually connecting to? And actually making sure that all that stuff is actually valid and good before you actually try to connect up, because all of that stuff is risk. We need to really just make sure that everybody understands what those things are. And this is also an everything initiative. This means that everybody from the CEO all the way down needs to do this. Anybody who touches computers as part of their job really needs to have access to this training and needs to be part of it. It needs to complete it also. But we also need to make sure that that information happens on a regular basis and that we update that. So
yeah, Gerald, one of the things I like to on the training side, where I really like to kind of reinforce the CEO and everybody else as well, is because it's interesting that the CEO, while they might be, well, not always a savvier user from a technology perspective, but they are definitely ones that are exposed to more risk. They're the ones that are more likely to be attacked. They're the ones that are more likely to be traveling. That put them in positions where these common threats that happen, or the common targeting that hackers and bad actors do, the CEO and the leadership and the folks that travel, that go to coffee shops and go to hotels and conferences and things like that, are actually going to be exposed to more of this risk. So they should absolutely not be immune from going through the training. Even though sometimes I think that's sometimes the mentality, like, oh, this is for all the staff, but not for me. Whereas actually the risk is greater with the the executives or the leaders of the organization, because they're typically exposed. So just a comment to reinforce that everyone needs to get trained.
Yep. No, and they really are the greatest level of security risk. They're the people that have the most access to things. They're the people that, that do the most traveling and all that kind of stuff. They're also the ones that a lot of people listen to. So they're also the ones that are highly spoofed. So, to identify when it's actually the CEO sending you an email versus somebody spoofing or pretending to be the CEO sending you that email is a big deal also. So some very common things that we should focus on during this training are things like phishing, spear phishing, which is very targeted versions of kind of these emails. CEO fraud, so performing actions like the story at the beginning of the presentation. Credential harvesting, so finding out different ways of getting people to click through and actually enter in their username and password into things. The risk over USB drives, a very common action, not so much here in Minnesota, but in other parts of the country is an action called USB dropping, where I put a little virus on a USB disk and I send it out there so that people want to click on it. And then also some social networking risks. What are the risks about advertising information out on the internet? Do I want to post information about me getting getting some great funding, or that we're going to make a large purchase as a company, or those kinds of things? How much information do we actually want to put out on the internet, and how do we want to control that information so that people know whether or not it's trustworthy or potentially making us insecure?
And just the story real quick on the USB risk side. People think, like, is that still a thing? I was at it is. I was actually at a security conference last year, and one of the presenters actually took 30 different USB sticks and dropped them around the airport, dropped them at the conference, dropped them when he was traveling over the last couple of weeks prior to the presentation. He dropped 30 USB sticks, and he got over 50 hits on his pseudo website. It was his website to gather this information, but I mean it's real, and that the risk with that is that bypasses basically almost all of your security if people do that. So it's a real thing, and all of these things are a real thing. But it's fascinating how creative hackers are, and a USB stick doesn't cost very much, but it actually is proven to be pretty darn effective. So it's great to get training on that too.
Yep. And now that we've trained our staff, one of the big things that we need to do is we need to repeat this over and over and over again. So, and not just with the same information, not the same repetitive kind of conversation. We need to do it in a timely, and we need to make sure that it's always updated. We need to give them current topics about it. So, part of that process would be sending out, quarterly updates with maybe what the modern threat is, or more training about some kind of thing. We also want to test on a regular basis. So let's send out messages out to the staff and say, this is the kind of spam that's going on these days. These are the kind of phishings that are happening, and let's see if people actually click on it. Let's see if people do things. Maybe do a credential grabbing test where we actually get people to try to enter in their credentials into a fake website. Doing some of that kind of stuff. We also then want to report on all these kind of actions. We want to get information back that says, this is how many people clicked on these fake runs. This is how many people have run these tests. We want to make sure that we actually go through and get people to accept or get additional training when necessary to keep moving forward with these kinds of things. And then also we want to provide additional incentives and gamification in these kind of scenarios. So, sometimes it's as easy as just saying, hey, everybody has to do this and this is the way it's going to be. Sometimes in order to get buy-in and get your users really trying to look for these kinds of things, it requires some kind of an incentive or action. I've even heard groups, where they've tried to say, you get a point for every one of these that you spot and you report into us, because that's how we get people to become interactive about it and really trying to look for what's going on. So yeah, it's all about producing these loops and feedbacks as to what we need to do and keeping it current in everybody's mind. Of course, this is all just one layer in a security framework. We need to make sure that we also push and engage in other factors. So, this is not a reason to get rid of all those message filters and those web filters and all that kind of stuff. We really do want to keep all that stuff in place. So we want to make sure that this is part of your encompassing security posture that you actually use inside your company. So really pushing things like single sign-on and multi-factor, knowing when those credentials are being used, knowing when, making it hard for people to use things if they don't have access to the information that they need. And then even just trying to block it as much as possible. So blocking the bad websites using DNS and web filters, blocking the bad emails before they even come in using your message filters, all of that kind of stuff is still very important to your security posture. We just need to make sure that even those things that do sneak through are getting blocked.
Yeah, and DNS, for those who are non-technical, is it's an acronym that calls for domain name services, where it basically translates humans speak in words and computers speak in numbers. So that's basically the translator. So that's a common way to be able to basically filter out bad domain names, where if there's known bad domain names or websites that are out there, DNS actually can filter that. Does domain name services can actually filter that. So that's
So yeah, that's perfect description as to how that works, Nate. Thanks. So a little bit about how we perform some of these trainings and testings. We kind of look at these things and we do exactly kind of based upon this posture as to how we actually set up our own structure for the product that we're developing right now. We go around and we actually perform that blind baseline. We really work with the customer to make sure that everything we identify the exposures, we identify the threats, and we identify how much click through they actually get on those kinds of things. We then work back with the staff and identify what kind of training modules would be best for their company. and what those, how many people they got click-throughs on. You know, was it a high-risk scenario or a low-risk scenario? What is that kind of come through to that picture? We then, you know, help the customers review their different policies about acceptable use, make sure that everybody's aware as to how much this really is a big deal. And then we launch that initial training package. And that initial training package is usually about a 45-minute training that really goes through various levels of user level security. So it talks about everything from phishing to USB attack to website attacks to various different methods, what kinds of things to look for to make sure that you're actually going to secure web pages and secure servers when you're actually taking those kind of actions. And then we also recommend any additional training modules based upon their organization. We also send out monthly ongoing tests to keep track and keep the people efficiently identified. We send out those tests not only in a random fashion, but using a random set of emails, so we don't get what's frequently called the prairie dog effect. So instead of sending out all the messages all at once and everybody just kind of gets it and says, hey, I've got a message, I bet you got one too. You know, we send them out over a multiple week time frame just to see how many people click on things when they don't even know that they're coming. We also perform quarterly deep dive topics where we actually go in every quarter and we say, hey, here's a new topic that you really should know about. One of the ones that we're pushing out right now is the CEO fraud. Really making sure everybody understands what CEO fraud is, doing some of that kind of stuff. We've got multiple trainings that we're trying to develop to help put into that scenario. And then also, you know, doing some annual reviews and making sure that everything is, you know, that we're doing this over and over and over again to keep everything moving forward and identifying where your security posture actually is from the user standpoint. So, do we have any questions at all?
Yeah, Joel, I guess, you know, help me understand, like you mentioned on one of the last content specific about an organization. Is that relative to the results of the baseline, or is it because they might be in a certain industry like medical or financial? Like, help me understand what, when you said that some of this training is specific to an organization, what does that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of times it's based upon the industry that they're in. So whether it be HIPAA or PCI, you know, something like that, bank fraud. If you're underneath some of the financial type regulations, it would be identifying, you know, what kinds of things that you really should look out for in those kind of trainings. So you know, sometimes if we've got a customer that we know had a very high risk ratio, and on top of the base training, we may push some HIPAA training if they're in the medical industry to make sure that they understand that this is not only a generic type security risk, but there is also these additional factors for HIPAA type scenarios.
Good. All right. See if there's any other questions. That was one of them that came through. What's the typical? I mean, from if you're to do a baseline, what does that look like as far as you know, just the timeline? Is that a 2-day process, a 2-month process? Help me understand the kind of the parameters there of what that looks like to actually get that done, to see what what our team is doing.
Yep, most baselines we perform over a week period. That week period is a random sample and a random message kind of time frame. So what we do is everybody will get one, but we'll send random people random messages at random times. So it's all spanned out across that week. We kind of identify it so that they come in during business hours, so that they aren't coming in, you know, after hours when they're maybe getting identified as spam or somebody's just kind of going through them easily. Just kind of coming into their mailbox at random times during the week and you know, getting identified. And we do that random time, random message kind of thing to help alleviate that prairie dog effect, to keep people from, you know, hey, I got one of these messages. Did you get something like this? People really don't recognize what's going on until it's almost too late. So.
Gotcha. No, I think that's good. That's important, right? I mean, I think that's where not only to make it as anonymous as possible, meaning there's only a few people in the organization who know about it, and I love the prairie dog effect analogy in that the word will spread that something's going on. So how can we try and get as real of a test as possible? So random emails, random people at random times. So all right, well, I think that's all the questions today. Any final thoughts, Gerald, before we kind of wrap up and sign off? I would say, please contact us if you have any questions. Definitely, folks from Mytech are going to be, this is something that we're going to be talking about. It's a real important issue that most organizations are not doing anything about right now, and it's actually not that complicated or expensive to accomplish. And so we'll definitely be talking about that. And then just want to leave, just to give you a moment to think about your final thoughts, Gerald. But a moment, we'll send out emails about our in-person event that we have at our office in Minnesota next week, and then in-person event that we have at our office in Colorado next month, relative to, okay, so what happens next if you get that one person? We're going to try and prevent anybody from clicking on anything, but if you get that one person to click on something, now what? So that event's really going to be about, okay, it's just another layer, knowing that there's a good chance that someone in your organization sometime will click on something, and you're going to be in a position where now we got to recover from a bad situation. So we're going to be talking about that soon. So Gerald, with that said, any final thoughts as we close out?
No, I think that the biggest thing that I can impress on people is that this really is the biggest risk right now. No matter what you might think about, outdated, security practices or this or that, it really is the user is the biggest risk right now. Everybody is really trying to push on this.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for joining us today about the July edition of Mytech U, where we talked about the human firewall, how it needs to be information security's greatest asset. We all need to work towards that goal. So we'd be happy to work with you on that. But with that said, thank you very much for attending, for listening today, or joining us afterwards for the recording.